If you're looking at a system today that doesn't scale well and you need a solution that scales well, maybe you have to go back to your board and say, look, I'm going to have to spend $100 million to build the platform for the future because what got us here won't get us where we're going. You've got to be able to step back and say, hey, we built a great thing, but it's only got so much mileage on it. We've got to rebuild it for the future. You don't want to alienate people and say, oh, you're not a part of our future. We're going in another direction. You want to bring them in. And if you don't bring them in and encourage them to help make a better mousetrap, you're losing all of that knowledge base that they have.
Hi everyone, welcome to another episode of the GCS Leaders Series. We've got Rob Suero here with us today. He's Head of Strategic Engineering for Beegol. As you will know, in GCS world, we work a lot within the broadcast, within the telco, and within the mobile network space. It's something that we're really proud that we are a leader within. And Rob is also a leader within this community, and someone that I've been speaking to for quite some time to come on the Leaders Series and tell us more about his career. The particularly interesting thing about this conversation is not only is Rob at the cutting edge of technology with end-to-end diagnostics within Beegol, but he's kept himself at the cutting edge of technology with the different organizations and roles that he's done throughout his career. And I think for anyone, aspiring leader, aspiring technologist, someone that wants to have a really exciting and interesting career, it's interesting to hear someone that has done that and then their advice on how to stay ahead of the game, both in terms of the companies that you work for, but also yourself as an individual. So I think this will be a really interesting conversation. I know it's a very interesting conversation. So without further ado, here's Rob. Hi, Rob. How are you?
I'm well, David. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Not too bad. Yes, it's always good to speak to you across the Atlantic. I think we organised this in the conference hall in the RDK conference in Amsterdam, didn't we? So we're such jet setters, Rob. We're kind of around the world, aren't we? So good stuff.
I'm delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
Brilliant. Well, it's going to be a great conversation. As I said, we've got Rob here as Head of Strategic Engineering from Beegol, and someone I have worked with very closely over the past, it must be about like 5-6 years, isn't it, Rob? With regards to this industry, particularly around RDK, which is in a company organization that you work with, and it's great to have you here. It's always great to speak to people that I've known for a while and done business with, but to kind of really, really kind of get inside your career journey and your story. So I'm really looking forward to this. But I guess with regards to that, tell us a bit about yourself, Rob. Tell us a bit about your background, kind of what you do. I'm just really interested, just broadcast being a very important market for us, what your position is within that market itself.
Yeah, so I'll go back all the way in the Wayback Machine to college. I have an undergraduate and a master's degree in computer science from the University of Central Florida. And I would say that those degrees are the most consequential thing in my career. Learning how to think algorithmically, how to break down problems and build solutions that are scalable and nimble was really, really important. And I still pull on that experience today. I worked on my master's while I was working, but when I graduated, Time Warner Cable was starting up a video on demand trial in Orlando, Florida. And then I was able to jump into that trial, and it was a really good job. So if you think about up until that point, everything was linear TV. It was all broadcast TV. And what we were able to do there is take that and make it on demand. It really hadn't been done on video before. Today, it seems like, is there another way? But back then, there wasn't. We were using MPEG-1 compression, so really a long time ago. But it was a commercial trial, and we were very successful. It ran for a few years, and we wound that down in the late 1990s. And incidentally, as we were winding that down, Time Warner was starting another trial on the broadband side. They had this 1 megabit per second cable modem that they were going to deploy and run a trial with. So if you think about back then, the competition for a cable modem was 56K dial-up, and all the CDs you would get from AOL and everybody else. So a lot was happening then, and if you go back 31 years, how much this industry has changed from NTSC video and dial-up to what we have today. Now, when that trial was ending, an opportunity was opening up with Sea Change International. They were an ad insertion company, and they wanted to get into the video on demand space, which I had just been doing. So that was a really good transition for me, and I worked there for a while. Sea Change had two products, I would say best in class products. One of them was a video delivery system. They were custom built servers and software for delivering streaming video to set top boxes. And the other one was applications, the applications that would run on the set top boxes and allow a cable company subscribers to order the video or the movies or whatever it was that they wanted to watch. Over time, the Sea Change products were a little bit disrupted. The video delivery moved to CDNs, and that was a lot more efficient than using the custom built servers. And then the other big change that happened is the service providers, the Comcasts and Liberty Globals and Time Warner, which became Charter of the world. They recognized that if they wanted to innovate faster and be able to bring new products to market quickly, they needed to take control of their software. They were situations through mergers and acquisitions and everything where a service provider could have 30, 40 different set-top boxes deployed. And to put a new feature on that many devices and try to time that and work with all those vendors to do it, it was really, really difficult. And so Comcast and Liberty and Time Warner took the lead in developing an open source software stack, which became RDK. And so as things were changing in the video on demand space, the RDK space was coming up, and that's something we've been working with on the application side at Sea Change. So it was a natural fit for me. And in 2013, I jumped into that. And I remember very specifically in September of 2013, it was the first RDK conference. We held it in, or maybe the first one I attended. We held it in Amsterdam during IBC. And we announced 1 million devices running on RDK. This is September 2013. I saw recently that our friend Jason Briggs announced, I think it was north of 200 million devices
Yeah.
running RDK software. So monumental change. But RDK software, and there's a competitor out there, but that's really been adopted globally. And that T-Mobile looked to go to RDK as well. And I ended up being head of product management for broadband at T-Mobile. And it was really that RDK experience that got me there. But RDK is really an enabling technology. You put it on your devices, you're able to innovate quickly. But what's really important, and you see a big push in this going on today, both with RDK and with the competitor Purple, is being able to run applications and manage application lifecycle on those devices. And that's exactly what Beegol brings to the table. So it's been a bunch of really smooth transitions over the last 30 years into Beegol, where I'm at today.
And is that very much a strategic thing? Where I'm always quite interested, if you look back on it, that I know that you're very well respected in the industry, right? So I know that obviously you're a great person to have within the team, but have you taken those moves at certain times? Because it seems like you've kind of spent 7-8 years at different places. I myself am a bit of a lifer at GCS, so I don't really know that. But do you think that that's a good time for an exec or a leader to spend and then move forward in your career?
I do. I'd love to say that I had a brilliant strategy and it was all well planned out.
Fantastic.
Sometimes it's better to be lucky than smart. And there's an element of that in there, but where I went and when I went, I think it was good. It's like if you spend too long in one place, there's a risk that you'll start to atrophy. So I think I've been the exact right amount of time in each of my jobs. It's worked out well for me. I'm excited about where we are now and the opportunities that we have as well.
Yeah. So tell us a bit about Beegol, because I think that's obviously your new home. We obviously get a wide range of listeners on this, not all of whom are quite as up to date with you on
Right.
particular broadcast technologies, Rob. So just from a layperson's perspective, I think it's really interesting for people to understand what we're talking about when we talk about this broadcast Wi-Fi world. Can you kind of put it into kind of lay people's terms, what Beegol does? And it's because it is a kind of behind the scenes thing, isn't it? Same as RDK, really. You don't really see it, but it does stuff in the background.
That's right. By definition, we're a real-time end-to-end diagnostic platform that's based on AI. That's a lot to digest, but the AI part is really key. But in order to get AI to work, you have to have really good data. And so that real time end to end is super, super important. So, in terms of an architecture, we have an agent that runs on broadband gateways and it collects that real time data, not just the data that's on the gateway, how's the gateway performing, but also the information upstream in the network. We can look up at the access network, the transport networks, maybe into a CDN. And so we get an end to end view of what the subscriber is experiencing and in their home, in the access network, which the ISP provides, and on into the transport and upstream. And what's important then is that we have that overall view of the network, and we're able to upstream that in an event-driven way. So now we're not just collecting reams of data and sending it up because nothing changed. It's event-driven, but we're able to send that up into the cloud, and our AI in the cloud is able to look at that and evaluate what kind of experience is a subscriber having. Is there a problem upstream in the network? Do we need to self-heal that network? Is there a problem with the subscriber that we can preempt before they know they have a problem? Those are really key parts. And so all of this benefits the ISP, and it's how much of it they want to use at a time. They could use it to empower their agents in the call center to better take care of their customers, or they could allow their customers to take care of themselves and not have to wait for somebody on hold. But ideally, ISP, and I think this is where we're going to be transitioning very soon. They'll be able to take care of the customer before they have a problem, so they don't have to get involved. If you can solve the problem for the customer without their involvement, you've won, and the customer's happy.
So it's the element of prevention rather than cure. So
Right.
Again, when you're sat in what keeps you up at night, as it were, is when the Wi-Fi cuts out or the router's not kicking out enough, that sort of kind of home problem or office problem of you're supposed to be getting Wi-Fi like this and you're just not getting it. And that is something that really within the industry, I don't know, if you think about a car, right? A car generally works, it works pretty well, and it's pretty, obviously not always, right? But I do think that, and again, don't take offense, I know it's your industry,
Sure.
right? But I do feel that Wi-Fi, every single provider, I use a kind of quite high speed, like 5G thing called GigaClear, but they does struggle to really get this right. It's not as kind of it's not as reliable as something like electricity or water or something like that, even though it is a utility. I think my own Wi-Fi and all the Wi-Fis I've ever had kind of kicks out every week or so. Why is that? Why does that happen, Rob? Why is it less reliable? You can argue to me that maybe I said there'd be no hard questions, but maybe I'm asking a hard question here. So.
Well, I don't think the Wi-Fi per se, the technology is less reliable, but a lot of things can interfere with that. We were looking at a problem a couple of days ago where there was downstream from the Wi-Fi in the Wi-Fi driver, there was a lot of messages, a lot of traffic going into there, and it was almost like within the device there might have been some kind of denial of service effect. There was so much traffic going through there, and that was cascading up and causing the subscriber to have maybe a bad experience. But it wasn't that the Wi-Fi didn't work. It was just things were, almost snowballing in the broadband gateway. And so a customer in the end, they were having a bad experience, but you can't really say it was Wi-Fi. And the customer doesn't care, right? They care, did I get a good outcome or did I not? And they didn't. But there's just so many moving parts in there. And that's why having an agent dedicated to looking at what the experience is on the gateway is really important, because everybody in everybody involved in there, whether it's the Wi-Fi software or a silicone provider or someone upstream, everybody can look at a situation and say, my software is working right. But when you plug all those pieces together, the customer is getting a bad outcome. And so one person has to look across all of that spectrum and say, hey, this problem, there's a little thing happening on the left over here in that chain, but it's cascading down. And by the time you get to the end, the customer has a bad experience. Everybody's saying my stuff works. And if you've been involved in troubleshooting, everybody says, hey, my stuff works. But when you pull it all together, even though everybody's saying it works, it doesn't. And I think that Beegol is in a perfect position to look across the entire network and say, hey, not only do we see where it's not working, but we see what's causing it not to work. We can look at the software, we can look at the log files, we can look at the source code, we can create, in effect, a sequence diagram of error messages along the way and say, here's how this cascades into a problem and solve for that. So yeah, it's complicated, but we can simplify it.
And it's also a really important part of the world, you know. And my daughters always joke about when the Wi-Fi goes down, I run about the house and switch everything off, and basically dad's in his the Wi-Fi is down mode. But I
Right.
mean,
And,
like,
and
lots of things run now on the internet. You know, it's such an important utility. And is that kind of present more challenges now? It becomes more like you said, when you first did this, you were doing video on demand, and you know it was not a niche product, but it was someone watching streaming films. But now it's integral to so many utilities within our world.
right. I think you're right. And I think it's going to be even more so in the future. You can say, well, my connected washer or dryer wasn't working, so I couldn't start the laundry when I wanted to, or I couldn't preheat the oven on my way in because the Wi-Fi was down. Those are minor inconveniences. But I'm working from home. If my Wi-Fi went down, I'm unproductive. I'd have to drive to a coffee shop or something, which would be pretty inconvenient. And then this call wouldn't work. But if you're at home and you need medical support, if you have a diagnostic equipment with you, that needs to work 100% of the time. I see a future where your checkups might be done through AI from home. And so it's got to be reliable. It really does. It has to work all the time.
And I guess from
It's
what you're
not a best of
saying
breed.
there, you know,
Mhm.
you in your role, you have to integrate with you know operators, with manufacturers. You know, you are in some ways bringing these together. And your role, I've always known you as someone that is kind of reaching out, and this is probably where we're bringing RDK is as a community, right? You know, there's a community
Mhm.
spirit within RDK as an open source tool. And that sounds like that's the sort of thing you have to foster within Beegol, because there's lots of different interested parties who want to make this experience great, but also don't want to be blamed if it's not.
True. That's exactly right. And so building on top of RDK, as you mentioned, which we view as an enabling technology, we're able to not just look in the network like you're saying, but also gauge the reliability of the software itself, almost like a test platform. We can see how the RDK software is performing. We can see how the network is performing. So we're giving you a real good end-to-end view of it. In fact, if I was back in my last role now, I would incorporate Beagle into the product quality assurance process to give me a different perspective on how it's going. That nothing broke, but is the software really performing the way we expect it to? Let's look at what's going on in the log files. Let's look at other KPI within the device. Is the CPU starting to heat up? Is the fan running all the time? And so we're able to not just evaluate the network, but also the software. I would incorporate that into my quality assurance process as well.
Fantastic. So when you look back over your career, and particularly since you joined RDK in this community environment, you're
Mhm.
now working in a role where you're obviously got a lot of different stakeholders with different organizations. How do you find, and what was your style for how you deal with these different parties, and how you manage to find a good balance and move things forward?
Well, I like to think when I'm working with different parties, I like to think of them all as different customers, and so they all have objectives that they're trying to meet, and if I can help them them as my customer, if I can help them meet their objectives, not just solve mine, but help them meet theirs, I think everything works better. So helping them solve for what they need, while also working on what I'm trying to get out of the relationship, it works a lot better.
And is that based on kind of experience and people that you've learnt from? I mean, have you had good mentors along the way that have helped you to kind of come to this sort of attitude?
Definitely, I have. Sometimes it's the school of hard knocks too. It's like you have a great idea, and it on its merit, it stands. It's a really really good idea, but if it doesn't bring a benefit to someone else, if it doesn't help someone else with what they're trying to do, they probably don't care. They're worried about their problems, and if you can help someone with their problems while working on what you need to get done, that kind of synergy is what makes these things work. And so if think about RDK, if you're a OEM and you are working on your own software stack, you're probably investing a lot of money in that software stack. But in the end, you're selling devices. And the software, you need to have it. It's got to be there, but it's not what differentiates you. The hardware does, and you're selling hardware. And so if we help an ISP trim their NRE costs and let them then focus on innovating in other areas and differentiating their devices, that's a win. If we just say we're here to replace your software, ours is great, just use ours, you're not giving them any advantage. And you've got to give them an advantage. What problem do they want to solve? Well, certainly they want more money to innovate with. And if we can solve their software problems and free up that NRE for them to innovate in other areas that make them more competitive, that's a benefit for them. The
Fantastic.
same happens with silicone providers and value added service providers all along the ecosystem. As long as you find a way to help somebody, they're going to be eager to work with you.
Yeah, it's about building up those relationships over time. It's about building up that trust over time, and that's something I think that's universal in business that, and this is kind of in some ways like the kind of the relationship that we've built up and our team have built up with you, Rob. It's quite
Right.
symbiotic, and that's GCS has worked very closely with RDK and your guidance to help with the skills and the talent attraction side of it. And that's been really, really interesting just to see kind of from within a software company how it really works. And, that's something that recruiters don't always get to do. So, we really appreciate that. I wanted just to go back to one thing you said with regards to
Sure.
sea change. You were there for many years, and you
Right.
said there with regards to it being best in class at the time, which I picked up on quite a lot because obviously there's a number of, in business, there's a number of examples of something that was best in class and then something caught up with it and then it's not best in class anymore. And I don't know who Sea Change are, right? There's nothing, there's plenty of companies that I don't know or they're, not in the same context. What, if you look back at that particular kind of time in that corporate career, what could have been done differently, do you think, that maybe might have kept that advantage that Sea Change might have had at some point?
Oh, that's a good question. So we were very focused on our technology and moving our technology incrementally along. And what could have been done differently? Well, we could have at some point, and this is a little hypothetical. It's easy
Hmm.
to go back, and hindsight can be 2020.
Yeah.
But if you look and say, we're doing really well. We're doing a fantastic job, and I think we're at the top of the mountain right now. But you've got to know that there's a lot of people that are looking to take your job, that are looking to take your market leadership role and make it theirs. And so constantly thinking about how I out innovate them. Maybe I start over again. I built this great platform for streaming video, but it's not the platform for the future. I've got to build a new one. I've got to start over again. I think that being able to do that is key. And you see that in all over the place going on right now. People are rethinking. And if they don't, someone else is, and they will take the leadership role from you. So I think being able to sit back and say, yeah, we did a great job, but we got to start over again is key.
And how do you balance that? Because obviously that's balancing long-term innovation, really thinking about 5, 10 years down the line and your product development roadmap, as it were, versus let's make as much profit or revenue as we possibly can now. Like how do you as a leader within technology balance that?
Yeah, you've it's like you've got to keep the car running, so to speak. But you have to build for the future. And so if you're looking at a system today that doesn't scale well, and you need a solution that scales well, you've got to maybe you have to go back to your board and say, look, I'm going to have to spend $100 million to build the platform for the future, because what got us here won't get us where we're going. And I think you've got to do it. That's kind of maybe a CEO responsibility, but you've got to be able to step back and say, hey, we built a great thing, but it's only got so much mileage on it. We got to build something new. We've got to rebuild it for the future.
And
Oh,
and RDK being something like open source, do you think that helps with that? Because obviously you've got so many contributors and it's being progressed by a community. Do you think that's a good way of fostering that sort of, future
yeah,
proofing?
to some degree, definitely. So if back in this example, back when the CDNs were coming out, there was probably a time we could have said, hey, this technology, this new technology that's coming up for supporting internet and stuff, we should consider that for our servers, and look at the way that they're innovating, and see if we can borrow that. Don't be afraid to use someone else's tools. All of these things build on each other, and all these enabling technologies. And it's okay to pick someone else's tool. It's like I said, what got you here won't get you there. And so you need to pick up something new. I think that's the kind of leadership that will keep a company relevant. You see some companies that have been around for 50, 60 years in these time when there's so much creative disruption going on. They do that. They last that long because they're always looking at the next way to do something new.
I'm just a totally left field conversation, and I'm thinking now about more the telecoms market and thinking about BlackBerry, right? And this conversation we
Mhm.
had, and obviously BlackBerry and the iPhone came along, and Nokia and BlackBerry were there, leaders in the market, and then smartphones came along and destroyed it. And you might not have any real comment on this, but it fascinates me in this world with AI how Apple haven't really done anything yet about AI. I know there is like Siri and that sort of thing, but every single other company, like you mentioned there, Beagle, we have AI in the cloud and that sort of thing. I'm just wondering if like talking as we are now about future proofing and thinking about business, if you have any kind of thoughts on why Apple haven't really done any AI yet that me as a layperson can see. Maybe there's loads of clever AI behind, but why do you think that is, Rob? You know?
Well, I don't know why they haven't done more. I
Hmm,
did see a couple of days ago that they're partnering with Google,
hmm,
and they're going to use some of Google's technology for Apple. I don't know if that's a long term or a short term thing while they work on their own solution, but
hmm.
I can. I can't speak to why they haven't done more up until now. I really don't know.
Yeah, and because the reason I asked that question is it strikes me that as a leader in technology and as someone that's constantly thinking about how to progress their software forward, and
Mhm.
we talked there about your kind of career and making the right moves at the right time that suit you, that that I guess one of the key things and one of the pieces of advice that you give to people is you need to be aware, one, for your company, but also for yourself, as to where technology is going, and the thing is to how to stay relevant. You know, um, I'm assuming that's something that you said those kind of lucky or whatever. You can't, but I'm
You know,
assuming that's something that you have thought about in terms of how to stay relevant, how to stay ahead of the game.
absolutely, and sometimes it's picking a new business as well. You see some companies pivot to a whole new business, but yeah, you've always got to look out and see what's changing, and how you can prepare yourself for that change. I was thinking about this recently. The in the United States, the Justice Department here, it's like our top federal law enforcement agency, was looking at companies like Google and considering whether or not they had a monopoly and were abusing their monopoly in the search engine world, and they're very focused on that. And at the same time, AI is upended that whole business, and it's like a problem if it doesn't exist anymore. Whether or not, that they were doing that, because all these AI engines can give you all the same data that a search engine was before, and delivered it on a platform, and then pats you on the back and says, "That's a very thoughtful question, Rob," and then gives you the answer. So
It's so
so
it's so very polite, isn't it? That's one of the things I
yes,
love
it
about
is. It is.
AI.
So everything's in change constantly. We see cars, even in the space launch industry. There's been so many changes. It's become more than just government agencies building rockets on demand. It's really changed, and we've just got to expect more of that. So, looking into the future, and are your skills going to be where the future is going? Is your company going in the right direction to get there? Because disruption is coming. It's just a fact of life, and it will just keep coming that way.
And I think it's always coming, isn't it? That's the thing I know from working in IT. These things keep coming. I think this is a major disruptor, but it's definitely not going to be the last, and it's definitely not going to be the last disruption this technology brings. And do you
Right.
now, when you're thinking about development and you're thinking about how you put things together, are you looking at new tools to do things in different ways? Um, that you're seeing like different kind of coding tools or different ways of coding or different ways of engineering things or building stuff. Is that something you're constantly reviewing?
Exactly. And even me, I unfortunately I'm not coding anymore, but I do a lot of PowerPoints, and I've been using tools like AI tools to build PowerPoints. Hey, I need this particular slide, and it takes some a little bit from Excel and a little bit from here and puts this together. And I can do that in AI much faster than I could if I was going to do each of those steps manually. And that's just more time for me to it frees up time for me to be more productive in other areas. So you constantly have to do that, individually and as organizations.
And using those tools, do you feel like for yourself that this is going to help kind of team working, is going to help kind of communities, or we need to be aware that maybe this could be something that would stop so much communication and connection with people?
Well, it can do both, right? So um, it could isolate people a little bit, and so they're not working together and they're not sharing. I think that's where middle managers. I know middle managers are under attack, so to speak. There's a lot of um, layoffs in at least in the U.S. in middle management layers, but they can also be the glue that brings these teams together, brings people together. You know, I remember when we went, um, our lockdowns for COVID, and everybody went home to work from home, and there wasn't a lot of communication, and we hired new people, and the new people never met the existing people, and there was no mentoring going on. But then we went back to the office, And a lot of people, you'd walk through the office and a lot of people had headphones on, and they were isolating themselves with the headphone. And so even though we were physically together, we weren't together. And so there's somebody needs to bring that glue together and make sure that the teams are working and collaborating. And what one person discovers, another person uses. You've got to productize these little tools. If you come up with a great AI way to do something and it saves you a lot of time, it's effectively a little product you've created based on AI, and you've got to share that with your team so others can use it as well, not working in silos. So it yeah, it's very. I think organizations are very vulnerable to siloing all these people, and the more they use AI, the more we don't need other people on the team to do the work, and so they could isolate themselves even further.
And that goes back to our whole community place, which is, when we're looking at Beegol, or it's part of a network of providers and services. Again, that is even an easier way to create silos because it's between different companies, isn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and I was thinking as I was answering that, in my first job, it was in the defense industry.
Mm.
We had teams that were tech writers, and we had teams that put together PowerPoint presentations. I'm not even sure PowerPoint existed, and we might have been using WordPerfect instead of Word. But we had individual teams that did all that, and you'd go meet with those teams, and they might share with you things that other teams were bringing in and working on as you talk through what your document needed to say or what your PowerPoint presentation needed to do. And as technologies advance, we do all of that ourselves. We do our own writing, we do our own PowerPoints, we do everything ourselves. And so we've isolated ourselves without even thinking about it in those areas. And the teams that were doing that for you, they're not sharing what other people are doing anymore. So we got to find other ways to stay connected with members of the organization.
Is that the kind of cultural element then, do you think? Getting people together, having kind of like, sales drives, going on meetings together, going to expos like we did when we go to RDK, meeting people face to face. I guess this drives even more importance for that face to face contact, doesn't it?
It is, and I know it's important too.
Mm.
Even within Beagle, it's important for our engineering team to know who the customer is and what the customer is trying to solve and how what they do contributes to our customer's success. If we just give them very formal requirements to say, hey, we need to go off and do this, they don't understand why they're doing it and how it benefits their customers. And if we just tell them what to do instead of telling them the problem we're trying to solve, we might be creating the wrong solution. Or if we explain the problem, there's what we need to solve. And they look at that and say, oh, I could solve it this way. And you were thinking of another way, it might not be nearly as efficient. So sharing all that information and making your engineering teams a part of the customer teams. And I think there's a lot of value to that. And it ends up building the right solution.
And over kind of half your career, you seem to have gone from that kind of engineering side to the customer side, which is what a lot of execs or senior people do. Would you say that's something that you've kind of picked up naturally as you've gone along, or something that you've always been, or you had to kind of work on in order to put yourself in that, to kind of put yourself out of the comfort zone? Rob, you strike me as someone that probably has the charm and the charisma to do it anyway. But
Well, well, thank you. It's like I'm
yeah,
talking to an AI now. Um,
yeah.
no, I think if I'd like to think of, and I might have mentioned this a couple minutes ago. I like to think of everybody I interact with as a customer in one way or another. Like
Mm.
in this case, I think of you as my customer. You've got me here, but you're my customer, and I'm delivering things for you. And so if every touch point is working with the customer and trying to give them what they need, it just becomes easy. It's a natural then to work in that way. The transition from being an individual contributor working on a keyboard, typing up lines of code every day, to engaging with customers and doing business development.
Yeah, yeah, and also I think it's the passion that you have for it. I think I obviously work within IT. I don't really understand technology, but I feel passionate about it. I feel passionate about what it's doing. So So obviously, if you understand it and have that passion, that's how you can really engage with suppliers, with partners, with your team, isn't it? And that's what really builds a leader, I think. And
Right. And I think it's also good to have a competitive element to want to succeed and win and be successful. That
yeah,
helps a lot too. You really care about what you're doing, that passion that you just mentioned.
yeah. What drives you, Rob? What drives you? What gives you that competitive edge? As someone who's had a successful career and you're now this new kind of strand of what you're doing, but what drives you?
I like solving problems. I always have. Whether as a kid building a jigsaw puzzle, I like solving problems. And so solving them in an elegant and efficient way makes me feel like I really accomplished something. I get a real sense of accomplishment about that. Not just solving a problem, but solving it in an optimal way. And so when I solve something, I look at it, is that the best way to have done it? When I was a software guy, I would go back and look at my algorithms and say, is that the most efficient? Is that going to use the fewest CPU cycles, the smallest amount of memory, the least amount of traffic? And I'd go back and rewrite things because it could be more efficient. Sometimes, and there's a joke about that, to get somebody to stop working on software, you just have to hit them over the head and say stop, because they'll keep working forever. And there was an element of that with me, or I just wanted to have the ideal, most optimal solution.
And did you ever get hit over the head and told to stop? Is that something that's happened to you, or do you need
Eh,
do you need a lead to say no?
Yeah,
That's good enough. We need to put this out now.
it's good enough, and so there is a trade off, right? The If you could spend another 2 months working on something and get 1% more benefit, maybe you took a couple assembly language lines of code out of the solution, but it doesn't really move the needle. You're better off moving to something else. So yeah, you got to be able to stop. And a couple of people said, "Yeah, hey, I think you're done."
You're done, Rob. Fantastic.
No,
What was the
yeah.
first? You just said that. I was just interested about kind of problems as a kid. What was? Have you got a kind of memory of the first time you solved a problem as a kid when you're like, oh, I really like doing this.
Well, when I was a kid, I had my own lawn mowing service,
All
and I
right.
would mow people's lawns, and so I tried to think about the most efficient way to mow a lawn. Do I go do a front yard and just go back and forth, or do I do loops around the house and do a perimeter and come in, maybe like a painting problem? And I tried to think about how to solve the problem, to mow the lawn in the most efficient way possible. I remember that from when I was in my young teens.
Was that diagrams and everything then, Rob?
There was no diagrams, no diagrams. But I might have looked at a stopwatch and said, okay, I mowed this lawn in 25 minutes today. I'm going to try a different pattern next week and see how that works.
Sometimes when you see the robot lawnmowers and they're doing it in some random way, isn't it? And you're like, why is it doing that? But I guess I was thinking to myself, that must be the most efficient way to do it. But I haven't got one myself. I've just seen them at like garden shows and demos and stuff. I don't know. I still
Yeah.
think like pushing the lawnmower around is the best way. Some things that it ain't broken. Let's try to fix it.
Yeah, exactly.
So to going forward for yourself, thinking about your current position at Beegol, what's exciting you on the, as we go into the next stages of the product development, of working with your suppliers, what's next?
So I'm looking at our users at Beagle today, and they're very operations focused in terms of how we handle customer calls. I think that using Beagle beyond that to proactively manage things in a network and open tickets and solve problems before anybody know they exist, or even self heal the entire network, not just a problem inside of a broadband gateway, is the next thing. And I think that's going to open up a lot of opportunities for companies that provide better solutions for their customers, drive up NPS, drive down costs, make their customers happier. So I see a lot of opportunities. We've collected all this data, as I mentioned before, and we have real time end to end look at the entire network. But now we can take advantage of it, not just to say, hey, the 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 gateway is working well, or no, it's not, but to make the entire operation from end to end more efficient and provide better solutions for the customer.
And I guess that's what this expansion of technology and using automation, AI, you can use that data more strongly to kind of keep progressing, can't you? That is the whole idea of this. Like you just said, we've got all this data, we can use it more and more and more. And you see
Yeah,
that happening in all industries, don't you?
right. And I think along the way we'll uncover things that we never thought about, right? Well, what somebody in the organization at an ISP will say, "Hey, that's really good. Have you thought about this?" And that will open up a whole new area for us where nobody's thought about it. We've been focused on the problems that our customers, ISPs, have told us they have, and we're just talking to the operations side of it. But when we meet with other people there, I think it'll open up whole new opportunities to make them more efficient, or maybe help their sales teams, knowing what their customers are doing, what their ISP customers are doing. So I think there's a lot of opportunity that we just haven't thought about yet coming down the road.
And I, and just as the kind of last point there, with your
Sure.
experience, when you're maybe a new person in a tech environment, or as a new leader or someone, it's what do you do when you identify that we could do this? That future proofing. How do you go about it? How do you remain open to those new ideas? Because I'm assuming new ideas sometimes come along. Well, I didn't think we could do that.
Well, yeah, I think with every new idea, there's a champion for the old idea that doesn't want to change. They've
Mm.
settled in, and I think you have to bring them along with you to help champion the new idea and show them a future. You don't want to alienate people and say, "Oh, well, you're not a part of our future. We're going in another direction." You want to bring them in, and they do have a lot of experience, and they have been solving these problems, and they're probably well aware of pitfalls down the road. And if you don't bring them in and encourage them to help make a better mousetrap, you're losing all of that knowledge base that they have. So I think you got to be careful in keeping your employees involved in the new ideas. Give them opportunities to grow with the company along the way.
I guess again, it's that community thing. It's about sharing that. It's about working together, isn't it? So
Right. And I guess my background in open source software, you know, it's all community based. Then makes me think that way.
brilliant. Well, Rob, I'm sure that the next chapter in Rob Suero and Beegol will be absolutely fantastic. It sounds like you've got some really interesting things going on, and we look forward to continue to work with you and seeing how you succeed. But thank you very much for your time today. It's been great.
You're welcome. Thank you, David. Thanks for giving me the opportunity.
Thanks, Rob. Cheers.